free speech, the right to practice your faith, the right of free assembly, the right to have free newspapers, all those things are absolutely crucial, basic human rights. The right not to be tortured, the right to have an independent trial, the right to be heard in a society. Those are very important things. We will oppose any effort to repeal the 1998 Human Rights Act, and we will remain members of the European Convention of Human Rights and accept decisions of the European Court of Human Rights because it matters. Are we to be alongside Belarus as the only European country that has nothing to do with it, or are we to say we want good human rights for ourselves, we want those human rights for everybody else? If we walk away, where is our moral authority to criticise the far right in Hungary for what they're doing to travelling people, the effect and the ill treatment of gay and lesbian people in other countries? No, our moral strength comes if we accept the same standards ourselves. That is what a human rights agenda must be about. Convention on Human Rights has had some very interesting effects in British law. A couple of weeks ago, there was the historic verdict of the Hillsborough tragedy, of those football supporters who lost their lives. Those football supporters who were so abused by so much of our media, who were so deceived, their families so deceived by a combination of media hype, cover-up and dishonesty. Their tenacity, and it was incredible tenacity, brought those things to light, got a new inquest, and got the judgment that was made a couple of weeks ago. They did that because they were able to use the Human Rights Act, because they were able to use the European Convention. So when the Daily Mail and others make endless light-hearted comments about the Human Rights Act, protecting speeding motorists or whatever other nonsense they come up with, it actually matters about bringing justice. And it's those communities, those working class communities on Merseyside, that brought justice for Hillsborough, and I believe will bring justice for many, many other cases that have to be uncovered. The function of Parliament, the function of government, the function of law has to be to enable citizens to have their rights when the state gets too strong, too powerful, and wants to cover up its own inadequacies, as it did in the case of Hillsborough. That's why human rights matters to all of us. One day, any of us might need that. We also have issues of human rights across the whole continent at the present time. There is a refugee crisis affecting Europe at the present time. That refugee crisis is very serious. That refugee crisis is brought about by wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya. It's brought about by human rights abuses in other countries. And hundreds of people have died trying to cross the Mediterranean. The people smugglers are appalling people. Those that make money out of it are obviously appalling people. Condemning them doesn't, unfortunately, solve the problem. You have to face the issue of why they're fleeing in the first place, why they're trying to gain a place of security. Are we going to solve the issue of the refugee crisis that's facing so many all across Europe and the Middle East by barbed wire, by CS gas, by warships, by barbed wire fences between countries that are a long way away? Or are we going to say, no, this is an issue that affects all of us? Any one of us in a different situation could be a refugee. We could be fleeing, trying to get somewhere safe to survive. And so there has to be a coming together, a sharing of the issue. Bring about the political solution, of course, but also have a hand of humanity to those that are suffering at the present time. And so that has to be. That's the strong message that we put on those issues of human rights. But there are also issues about exploitation of people across the continent. I raised at Prime Minister's Question Time with the Prime Minister the question of the Posting of Workers Directive, This might not sound like headline news to everybody. In fact, some people don't know what the Posting of Workers Directive is. It's nothing to do with the Post Office, I assure you of that. What it's about is companies that seek to undermine collective agreements and wages all across the continent. So, if they go to a relatively high-paid economy, maybe in Western Europe, Germany, France or Britain, from a relatively low-paid economy somewhere else, move a group of workers in, pay them the local rate of the country they've come from, usually an Eastern European country with lower rates of wages, and thus undermine the collective agreements in industries here, make people redundant here, and actually grossly exploit the people that they brought in. The Posting of Workers Directive would ensure that that couldn't happen, and that the local appropriate rate was paid, and that the local collective agreements were actually honoured. What is it about the British government that, despite repeated requests, they refuse to endorse this directive, which would do so much to end the exploitation of migrant workers, as well as ensure job protection for other people? It's an intelligent, sensible measure that's been promoted by trade unions all across Europe. Or is it because they're quite relaxed about the unscrupulous employers driving down wages because they actually support the idea of a race to the bottom in their whole economic thinking? I tell you this, a prosperous country and a prosperous continent and a prosperous world isn't made more prosperous by cutting wages, removing protections and worsening conditions, and at the same time allowing the very richest to be enriched. A prosperous society is one that shares the wealth and narrows the gap and provides real good wages and real security at the bottom end of the scale. That is the economic strategy we wish to follow, not the one of the And so we've worked together with people in other countries as to an anti-austerity agenda. We work together with people in other countries to promote a different economic agenda. John McDonnell, our Shadow Chancellor, had a fantastic economic conference a couple of weeks ago in London. 800 people attended this economic conference. Why did they come? Because they wanted to hear an alternative economic strategy. The strategy that says austerity is a political choice, not an economic necessity. They wanted to hear the basis of solidarity with people across Europe who are thinking in much the same way. And it's also about how our party is going to operate. More input from every member of this party, every affiliated member of the party, supporters of the party, on their ideas on policy making, so that we organically grow our ideas. So come 2020, it won't be a big surprise the agenda we're going to be fighting the general election on. It'll be very obvious, because we will have been campaigning on it for all these years. It's that coming together that is so very, very important. We have an immediate choice coming up in the referendum on the 23rd of June. Are we to say, we're going to leave, we're going to walk away, or are we instead going to say, we want to protect the gains we've made in Europe? I've mentioned some of them on environment, I've mentioned some of them on workers' rights, but are we also going to be there to chase down the tax evaders, to stand up to the global corporations that, as we speak, are trying to negotiate through the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership a kind of enfranchisement of the most powerful corporations at the expense of national governments? Wouldn't it be a good idea if we had a Labour government that was prepared to say, we are not accepting that. We're not going to accept this race to the bottom. We're not going to accept the worst bits of deregulation in the USA imported into this country and Europe, which would weaken collective bargaining, which would damage our environment, damage our consumer rights, and all those things. We better stand up to the power of global corporations with others who think the same as us across Europe. Because I fear what the right and the Brexit campaign really want is an economy which is deregulated, which is a race to the bottom, which is one of grotesque levels of inequality, and great levels of exploitation by those that come in to that unregulated environment and economy. Every social gain we've ever made in this country has come because ordinary people stood up and demanded it. That's how we got national insurance, that's how we got the pension, that's how we got the welfare state, that's how we got the National Health Service, that's how we got council housing, that's how we got so many of those things. And so we're campaigning for a vote to stay in to reform, stay in to change, stay in to work with other people to achieve social justice across this continent, not an agenda of blaming the poorest and most vulnerable for the problems that we collectively face. Instead, collectively face the problems so the poor and most vulnerable don't suffer. That surely has to be the right agenda. Issues that we face in this country as well. The real issue we face is a Tory government. Yeah. That's the real issue. I think we're all agreed on that. The issues we face are opportunities for young people to tackle the housing crisis, and I'm interested in the vote that took place in St Ives. I'm interested in the strategy of ensuring there is decent housing for all in all parts of the country, that we don't have homeless people, that we don't have desperate people sleeping on the streets. Those things can be dealt with if we have an attitude of mind that says an economy must work for all, social policies must work for all. We don't pass by on the other side and ignore those in desperate need. That is what the Labour Party is about. That's what I want this party to achieve, and that is actually what we're achieving in many places. We're faced with a government that wants to continue damaging local government, continue privatising our National Health Service, and continue all that damage. The alternative could be so much better and so much more effective. How about a government that wanted to use EU money as well as our own money to invest in improved transport infrastructures? Candy mentioned the broadband issue. That is a great step forward, but we need better quality rail links, better quality housing for many people in this part of Britain. But we also need that strength which we have, that strength within our party to achieve much of this, but also that idea, the values, the cultural values and cultural diversity, so that we're not afraid to invest in local theatres. We're not afraid to invest in cultural activities and cultural opportunities, because when you teach people things, you never know where it might lead. If you leave people in poverty, inadequately housed, poorly educated, we all lose. We lose the engineers, we lose the musicians, we lose the writers, we lose the doctors of the future. But if we invest in education, if we invest in opportunities, if we don't penalise people for going to university and trying to improve their own skills that we might all benefit from it, we all lose. If we agree with the principle of a collective approach in society, we all gain. We want to carry that collective approach across national frontiers on issues that I've talked about, of working rights, environment, and so many other things. That is what we as a party are trying to achieve. And that's what's so fantastic about the growth of our party, the joy of people who are so active in our party, and that is why it's such a wonderful pleasure to be here today in Newquay to be able to share those thoughts with you. Thank you very much indeed.
Just a quick announcement, ladies and gentlemen, from the hotel. the owner of the red Nissan WK53 YKC, you're blocking the entrance to the car park for the hotel.